Alrighty, right at this point, ladies and gents, we are going to go further international and bring into you via the magic of the internet our next presenter who's going to join us here in just a few moments. If I get back to my right place. We're moving to the next set of sessions, and this is the Hemp for Fibre sessions. These are sponsored for us by iHemp Aotearoa. Thank you very much indeed for the sponsorship. It's absolutely fabulous to have. The gentleman that we're going to be going to, and I'll just look across to our desk, and I believe we have him on the line. We're going to have a presentation from the Managing Director of Hemp International Australia. Now, Bob Doyle is current President of the Australian Industrial Hemp Alliance, and he and his family operate a beef and cattle horse enterprise on Edenvale at Vasey with over 400 head of cattle and 20 horses. And the Doyles first grew industrial hemp in 2009, so it's fantastic to have him here all the way from Australia. Ladies and gents, round of applause for Bob Doyle.
Thank you. Have you got the screen? Is the screen up on the presentation?
We have a screen. Yes, there it is. We understand that you are on a rural broadband link.
Yes, that's right.
Excellent. So our audience will bear that in mind as we take the video images from here.
No, thank you very much, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get over there, but yeah, appreciate the invite. And just on your introduction, I am no longer the president of the Australian Industrial Hemp Alliance. That's a fellow by the name of James Vosper. But I did first get involved in growing industrial hemp in 2008 when it first became legal in New South Wales. And we grew crops for eco-fibre. And you've got Phil Warner talking to you later on this afternoon. I assume Phil's in the crowd now.
Would like to say he is, but he's not, unfortunately.
So, yes, we actually have grown crops since 2009. And we commenced our own fibre processing plant in 2014 because our distance to the fibre mill that was at Jerry's Plains, run by Eco-Fibre, was just that bit too far away. So there's two other families, Darren Jones and Luke Richards, and their families involved. We trade as Dungog Hemp, and at the moment we actually have the only operating fibre mill in Australia. There are a few about to get underway. But yeah, we are the only operating fibre mill in Australia. So we grow the crops on our own properties. We've had to grow our own seed for security of supply. And we are now at a stage where we're contracting other growers. So we got involved in hemp fundamentally because we were looking for a sustainable solution. We were dairy farmers. Our farm went through a farm succession plan, and I had 5 brothers and sisters that the farm got split up with, and I didn't have enough land to keep dairying, so we saw hemp as an opportunity to keep another generation of Doyle's farming. I'm 6th generation. We've got the 8th generation living on the farm. And I was looking for an alternative to just people drifting in and working with coal mines. The coal mines have had a fairly negative impact on agriculture in our area. Fundamentally, you can go and drive a truck for $120,000 a year. It's pretty hard to keep good labour on farms. And the other good thing about hemp, particularly the fibre, is manufacturing needs to happen in regional communities because the product's so light. So it offers more than just a farming opportunity, it offers a manufacturing opportunity for our regional communities. And as everyone's aware, it ticks many of the sustainable boxes on the energy side of things. And when I talk about the Australian hemp industry, I break it up into 6 components. You've got fibre, which is low THC. You've got food, which is low THC. You've got non-food grain, which is also low THC. You've got medicinal low THC, which is using industrial hemp varieties, but in Australia you have to have a federal licence. And then you've got medicinal high THC, and that's definitely not industrial hemp. And finally, you've got marijuana. And before I break it down and start talking about mainly fibre, I list those different categories before because I think it's very important we just make a distinction at the start that the seed industry is quite different to the food/grain industry. And it is an area of the industry which needs to be developed in its own right. The one variety can produce the top 4 products: fibre, grain for food, grain for industrial uses, low THC, medicinal, but generally under different agronomy to achieve commercial yields. And the big news that happened in Australia in November 2017 was approval of hemp grain for human consumption. And that's obviously changed the interest. Running parallel to that, there's been a lot of hype about the medicinal side of it, but fundamentally, big change for farmers in Australia was the approval of grain for human consumption. And I understand you guys don't have full approval to consume, and that actually may be good news in the short term, because while this is not the focus of my talk, at the moment in the grain industry, Australia runs, from my perspective, a large risk of sending a negative message to the farming community because of poor crop performance. And getting the balance right between price and achieving reliable yields just isn't occurring. And the competition from other crops is quite high. So in places like Tasmania where the hemp industry, the grain industry is the best developed within Australia, hemp's still not rating all that high in terms of returns relative to other crops. So there's been this focus on import parity pricing, and I think that combined with the poor yields is making it difficult to get the Australian domestic grain industry off the ground. And there is a relationship to that for us as fibre producers, in that there is this great opportunity for access to grain stubble. And if we look at developing a commercial fibre industrial hemp industry in Australia and how that relates to New Zealand, our industry is still at the very early stages of development. The pioneers commenced 15, 18 years ago. Legislation in New South Wales was 2008, so only just 10 years ago. Phil Warner, who's going to be talking to you, he's been one of the prime pioneers of the fibre industry in Australia. Another fellow is Adrian Clark and TCI. My relationship in the industry has really come through our association with Phil, and that impacts on the way we process. We basically use what I call is an eco-fibre style of processing system, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on. So with the fibre industry, we start with the seed. To grow that fibre crop. Now that fibre crop in that photo you can see now, that fibre crop's yielding about 12 tonne of dry matter to the hectare. And that is correct. Those two photos, that grain crop and that fibre crop, are actually the same variety. And we have to grow the seed crop using different agronomy in order to be able to physically harvest it. You can't harvest a seed crop off that crop as it's standing ready to be harvested for grain. So that crop will grow to 6 metres high. We have achieved yields of 20 tonne to the hectare, but we didn't actually quite make it on good fibre spec when we had those really high yields. We encourage farmers to grow about a 12 to 15 tonne crop, and there's no profit in it if you don't get a 10 tonne crop. So we grow specific fibre crops because we're producing for the herd market, primarily going into housing. It is important, particularly as there's going to be a lot of concentration in the early days until you get some fibre processors operating in New Zealand. There is a potential source of fibre from your grain crops. In saying that, a harvesting stubble has its own difficulties. There is a big question mark on just how much of that stubble will be suitable because in the main, people have been finding it fairly difficult to grow organic grain crops. Our fibre crops going into housing must be pesticide free. And that's because people are building houses relying on the fact that their walls breathe. So they're not going to go and want to fill up their walls with a crop that has a pesticide residue. And the real driver at the moment, when the grain price that people have been talking about at $2.50, the farmer needs a market for the stubble in order to try and lift the total return for the paddock. So it is something that you need to consider with your grain crops. And in saying that there's it is a bit difficult to harvest, it's not like baling a crop of cereal stubble or I don't know whether you grow much sorghum over in New Zealand, but if you're growing cereal stubble and you're filling up the full width of your baler, you can't do that when you're harvesting or baling hemp stubble. Your baler operator will do a couple of 100 metres and he'll go home. So obviously, this is just another photo of our seed crop that we harvested. Linked to all of this, and it has a relationship with fibre opportunities, is obviously the big opportunity with harvesting medicinal and CBDs. And these photos are of the same variety. And we grow these products. There is an opportunity to work out how to harvest them. There is a whole heap of legislation, regulation, which is impeding that. And in Australia at the moment, it's operating between two completely separate licensing systems, which is just a waste of resource, because we can grow a good fibre crop and harvest low THC medicinal all at the same time. So I suppose the real focus of my talk is to talk about the fibre processing and what's driving the profits for fibre. And there are a number of constraints as to why the industry really isn't getting off the ground. The big one for us as a fibre processor is we don't have a good paying market for our bast. So, hang on, sorry. So, around the world, there is some fairly expensive equipment and there's some fairly large-scale production, and there are some markets that are really quite high-end. In Australia, we don't have that level of development. We have, as of all hemp, we've got stalks with low density. The initial processing must be near where the crops are grown, and we don't have these take-off industries that will allow us to scale up to get the technology that's currently being used in Europe. The technology in Europe, to make a reasonably labour-efficient mill, you're talking about €4 million just to get started. And once you start talking about those sorts of dollars, you've got to grow big areas and you have to have a reliable take-off market. So there is a mill being developed in Victoria, and that's using one of the TCI D8 decorticators. And I'm not 100% sure where they're at, but they're not off the ground yet. Ecofibre did have a mill at Jerry's Plains in New South Wales, but it closed down in March 2017. And our mill, we operate that. We bought an old timber mill, and we built a mill on the basis that we could survive with about 100 hectares of crop. And hopefully some of these other markets we would start to be able to develop the technology so that we could move into the higher end products. And if you break down the fibre, the stalk, you've got a few markets. You've got the whole stalk, and then you've got decorticated product. In the whole stalk, we were involved in the making of an extruded board, which was a timber replacement, and we did at a research level, we were involved in the making of a board that had the same density as Australian ironbark or jarrah, and it could replace a Shep hardwood pallet. It had a 2-ton rated pallet. The issue we had with that was we had to buy a resin out of China, and we couldn't actually get the resin cheap enough to make the whole thing work. We were price competitive at an export hardwood price. We weren't competitive at domestic hardwood price. We're now working on a whole of stalk product, which is different technology. And our aim is to produce a softwood equivalent timber replacement and be price competitive at the domestic market. And I'd imagine it's changed a bit in New Zealand as well as Australia. The price of timber, softwood in Australia, has gone up quite significantly thanks to the Chinese. And equally thanks to the Chinese, that while they were our problem trying to buy the resins when we were making the first product, now the fact that China's not taking our recycled plastic, we're actually looking at the opportunity to get into using a cheaper source of resin, and that product we're in the development phases of that at the moment. Whole of stalk is good because we sell everything we grow. With the decortication, we're splitting our product into bast and hurd. The Ecofibre process actually produced a fairly short bast. I've always felt that there's this opportunity to try and find a way to decorticate and keep the bast long, which is similar to what the TCI decorticator does. They can produce a long bast. So we've gone down that path of producing a mixed length bast, but our longest is about 600 mil. And then we also produce hurd. We have two main lines, big chip and main chip, fairly innovative sort of names. Our big chip is used in sort of subflooring with housing. It's also used for horse bedding. Our main chip is the main product going into housing. Most of the houses that we've sold product for, they use that. The fines is a waste product. It is used on a small scale as a render. And then we have our dust and our waste. The problem that we have is with our markets, while the potential markets, everyone talks them up and they're quite big, the startup scale for some of those markets is in the 1,000 plus hectares. And so to date at our mill, until recently, we've only sold herd. We do sell our herd for a premium. We do get a few complaints about the price of our herd, and we've gone to a lot of trouble to produce a high-grade herd. And the reason we've got such a high price on our herd is because we haven't been able to sell enough of the bast. We need a good paying bast market. Now, we do have a bit of trouble cleaning our bast, but there's an element of we haven't pushed that exceptionally hard because we haven't actually found a market that's really worth developing where we need that clean herd, which goes against what we actually originally thought when we got started. We did try China selling the bast. There's been a lot of talk about insulation bats. There is a lot of potential for the insulation bats. One of the good things about the insulation bats is you can use short bast. The problem is, again, the cost of the technology to make bats means that we've got to have a major scale up, because when we started, we had an unreliable supply of seed. None of the ducks lined up for anyone to make that sort of commitment for a major expenditure. So we're at a point now where seed's not as big an issue, and we now have to go down the path of looking at where we sit with that technology and just how big we have to get to make that work. There's been a lot of hype about the prices being paid for the bast. We can't find much interest ourselves. And when you look at cotton selling at $2,500 a tonne ex-farm, you would think there's got to be some real opportunities there. We are actually at the moment aiming to sell our decorticated bast into a market that was initially developed by Ecofibre as a whole stalk market, where they produced a product which they call stay mulch, and we're producing what we are calling a tree mulch out of our long bast. The return's not flash, but the significance is we're about to head in a path where we'll be selling 80% of the fibre that we have bought from the farm. And that actually makes a big difference to what we need to sell our herd for. Because one of the things that does happen now is we're actually limiting our opportunities in the pet bedding market because the price of our herd is so high. So I've just got a few photos here. This is Shepherd's Ground. It's an eco village. There's 4 houses have been completed. It's a 28 house development. It is of a scale of building where I consider there's some real opportunities for looking at affordable housing for the lower cost housing market, and it ticks a whole lot of sustainability equations. This is a higher end build. This is actually on the north coast, and this house won a Masters Builders Energy Award. We are playing around with paper production. We're selling some of our fines into paper production. It's a Kiwi, actually, is doing that up on the north coast. He did see the light and marry an Aussie girl, but he's developing that. It's not going to be a big market at this stage. It's going to be a high-end market. and what we have done is we've just done the rounds of a whole heap of artists that just test it to see how it shapes up. If you look at the paper market on a bigger commercial scale, we're probably looking at needing to get our bast that's going into that down to about $300 a tonne. And for that to work, we've got to be on real big scale. And equally, we need an even bigger market for our herd. And the housing market isn't that big. And the pet bedding market, which is our other market, won't be that big either.
Bob, just to let you know, we're just a little bit over time at the moment. If we can just move through, thanks.
Righto, not a worry. So that's our Ausbreed product for stay mulch. Growing for a fibre producer, this is probably some of the real guts of it. The specs that the processor wants will determine how you grow your crop. It will determine how you harvest your crop. There's no point growing a crop on spec and then trying to find a processor. Contamination by seed or weeds is a major issue for fibre processors because we can't grade out any broadleaf pith. So weeds like fat hen and amaranthus are a problem. For decorticated herd, it must be pesticide free. That's just a customer demand. And obviously for all mills, we're aiming to harvest or sell as much of the stalk as possible. That's the impact of mowing. The way we mow suits our system. If you were using a different type of processor, that type of mowing just won't work. That photo also just shows you how clean the ground is as a result of a hemp crop that's pesticide free. The amount of bast in the herd has a significant impact on its use for housing, and it does impact on the grading equipment. And that has been the only reason we've been able to get a premium for our herd for housing is because of the grading. One of the problems of that, though, is that it impacts on our packaging. A bit of bast in the herd makes it a lot easier to pack. You can compress it. Basically, a very clean herd is quite difficult to pack, and logistics is already a massive issue. It's not efficient sending our product, and we've got houses in Western Australia, Victoria, and in New Zealand. It is very costly on the freight side. And that is why there is this opportunity for more fibre processors, not just all over Australia, but regionally in New Zealand as well. Growing pesticide-free and weed-free starts with paddock preparation. That is the most critical thing. And the number of farmers who think because they grow successful cereal crops can go and grow a successful hemp crop, more than half of those crops just don't make the grade. And as a fibre processor, we just won't buy them. You've just got to do it right. It is a much harder crop to plant or to establish than it's often given credit. It's quite a big seed, but it is a very weak seed.
Well, we've got just about 1 minute left.
Righto. I think maybe if just quickly flick through some of the photos, just give you an idea of the scale. That's a fibre crop. That's another crop of the mowing. There's different methods of harvesting. This is Eco-Fiber's method using chopped. And it's basically like making silage. We bale all ours because there's some efficiencies in transport. Logistics is a major issue that you need to work your way through, because if you're going to make the most of growing a crop that is weed-free and pesticide-free, you've got about 7 days from when you mow to getting your new crop back in the ground. And just to give you some idea, that photo of that truck with those bales, that truck can carry 27 tonne. There's 10 tonne of hemp on that truck. There's 2 houses on that truck. So I probably, retting is something that needs to be discussed. There is a difference between what's ideal for the farmer and what's ideal for the mill. Storage, it must be stored in a shed or under tarps, and the ground surface needs to be well and truly defined. There is a lot of opportunity for fibre crops and grain. The fibre crops, you've just got to find a reliable and have a scale of business that someone can develop a mill. I won't go through all this. I will just want to finish off and say thank you very much just for the invite. I do admire the Kiwi attitude to farming. It's an attitude which is needed for this to work. And I think we've actually lost a bit of that in Australia more recent times. I just want to conclude and say that if you're going to be successful in the hemp industry and be part of a hemp industry, you need to be prepared to play first grade. And quite bluntly, don't bother getting involved in the hemp industry if you're happy playing second, third or fourth grade. It is a fairly tough industry to get involved in. There is a lot to learn. There's a lot of constraints within the industry, and there's a lot of people putting in some good effort, but everyone at all levels has to put in a very significant effort if you're going to make it work. So, yeah, thank you very much. I hope that has been helpful. And
thank you.
We actually, our local club is the Maitland Blacks. And, so with the exception of a few Kiwis, go the Wallabies.
Bob, thank you very much indeed for allowing us your time and also your experience and acumen. It's been fabulous to have it here. I wish we had a whole afternoon literally to be able to pick your brain. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but I would ask our audience here to, and I'm sure you can hear it, give a massive round of applause for Bob Doyle, MD, Hemp International Australia.
Thank you.